With ranked choice voting, we've had a lot of members keep, this has been a very popular topic that keeps being brought up. So definitely excited to have Herb on and, definitely representing Voters Choice New Jersey. So we're definitely looking forward to teaming up with them as well. And so we'll turn it over to Herb now for his presentation.
Okay, great. Thank you guys, folks. It's good that, thank you for inviting me here. Happy to be here with you guys. I see some familiar faces and some new faces, so that's good. As Kate said and Andrea said, I'm here representing Voter Choice New Jersey. We're nonpartisan, nonprofit. We're dedicated to electoral reforms to increase the range of choice on the ballot and produce fairer outcomes for all. We're here because our elections are broken or they're fixed, depending on who you ask. And, we have an opportunity to correct this with a completely nonpartisan solution that we hope all parties and independents can get behind. Political polarization is a defining feature of American politics today. Conservatives, liberals, progressives agree there's a growing gap between political parties. And now in a democracy, we may not always get what we want, but we at least want the system to be fair. All right, so let me just turn on the presentation here and share my screen. Where am I? Okay. So as I said, we're Voter Choice New Jersey. We're taking a team-based approach to this project. We have a bunch of great volunteers who have joined us, and one thing that we've done is create this very nice logo here that we're very proud of. In any case, so what is the problem with our current voting system? The current problem, there's something, it's called plurality voting. Plurality means you can win with less than 50% of the vote. It just means whoever has the most votes win. And so someone can be elected without the majority, right? And so one's example of this could be an election that looks like this, where candidate A only gets 40% of the vote, but yet candidate A would be elected even though 60% of the folks voted against that candidate. And that's called a plurality. Another thing that's wrong with the plurality system when you can only choose one person is that you can only choose one person and you don't get to express your opinion or your preference about other candidates. For instance, you might have liked Cory Booker and Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, and you're forced to pick just one of them when you cast your vote. So that's a problem. Right, we believe that's a problem because it forces you to choose one candidate. And like, here's another example. Like in the rest of life, we don't have to choose one thing. We get to have preferences. We have preferences that we can put in order, right? So here's something that one of the other problems with our current election system is what's known as the spoiler effect, and we're all painfully familiar with the 2000 presidential election in Florida, where George Bush and Al Gore were essentially tied. Bush had a 537 vote lead, but Ralph Nader was also in the race, and he got 1.64% of the vote, right? And that was actually 97,000 votes, which is way more than the 537 that separated George Bush and Al Gore. And from exit polling, it was determined that Bush would have gotten about a quarter of those votes, and Al Gore would have gotten about half of those votes. And that would have then given the state of Florida to Al Gore and the presidency to Al Gore, right? But yet Ralph Nader is in the race. He's exercising his constitutional right to be in a race, yet he gets called the spoiler. And no one wants to be the spoiler. No one wants to be called a spoiler, at least. And even more importantly, one thing that we know is that the major parties don't want their elections spoiled. And we think that that's going to be one of the unifying themes going forward, that no one likes elections to be spoiled, whether you're on the winning side, losing side, or the spoiler. It's not restricted to putting Republicans in office. In 1992 general election, we had Bill Clinton and George Bush running, and Ross Perot was in that race. Ross Perot was more similar to George Bush, and he got 19% of the vote. Bill Clinton ended up winning again without a majority of the support of the people, with only 43% of the vote. We saw that again this year in the 2020 Democratic presidential primary. We had almost 24 or more than 24 folks running in the Democratic primary. And again, you can only choose one, right? So then it becomes a question of, do you vote for your number one choice, or do you vote for a front runner? Somebody like Joe Biden in this case became a front runner, and becoming a front runner in the primary process becomes very important. And then folks are basically we're all forced to choose between supporting a front runner to make that candidate look stronger, or we feel sort of disincented to vote for our first choice, or even and no ability to rank these folks and say, these three people are all acceptable to me, and so on and so forth. And so we end up with the lesser of two evils, as displayed on this screen, this slide. So what is the solution? We believe the solution is ranked choice voting. With ranked choice voting, you get to rank your candidates in order. Your preference is not limited. Your voice is not limited to just one candidate. You can express your opinion on all the candidates on the ballot. You're not obligated to. You can vote for one or two or all the candidates, and you put them in order as is shown on the screen here. So let's look at this example that we have with the election we just showed. Under plurality voting, the largest share actually wins the election with 40%, right? With ranked choice voting, the majority of votes, no one has the majority of votes. Everyone has less than 50% of the vote. So there's no winner declared at this point in a ranked choice voting election. So how do we determine who wins an RCV, a ranked choice voting election? So when we count only the first choice votes. Here, this is a different example. These are different numbers. If in the first round someone does get over 50%, they are declared the winner, and then there's no need to go to the second choices of any of the ballots. So in this case, 55% wins the election. Ranked choice voting has no bearing on the election. The majority in the first round, they win, right? But going back to our example that we used earlier, where candidate A has 40%, candidate B has 35, C 20, D 5, there's no majority in the first round. So how do we proceed with the counting of this? Well, candidate D with 5% is eliminated from consideration. And the folks who voted for candidate D as their first choice, their votes get transferred. Another name for this is single transferable vote. Their votes get transferred to other candidates who are listed as their second choice. So even though candidate D is now out of the race, the voters are still involved. And I think that's a key distinction. The candidate is out, voters are still involved in the election. And in this case, we see 4% went to candidate A, bumped them to 44%, candidate B, 1%, and still no one has a majority. So we repeat the process, eliminate candidate C at 20%, and we show 1% go into candidate A for a total of 45, and 19% go into candidate B for 55%. So this is a majority in the third round. So this example, what this is meant to show is that even though the orange faction candidate had the most support in the first round, in actuality, sort of the purple faction candidates had more support overall. And so it shows how a ranked choice voting election will then allow the will of the people to be expressed more accurately, in that more folks supported purple candidates than supported orange candidates in this case. And so that's who got elected. So RCV is a practical solution. It promotes majority support. It eliminates the spoiler effect and vote splitting, and it lessens the importance of wasted votes and strategic voting. And one of the major impacts of ranked choice voting is that there's increased campaign civility. And the reason for that is that if you're in an election with 3 or 4 candidates, you're incented to try and gain the support of other candidates' supporters. Because as other candidates are eliminated from the race, you want to be their second choice. So the idea of just having to be better than the other person, and which then leads to all the negative campaigning, that goes away. So another impact of RCV, which one thing that we can all basically get behind, is that we believe, and we've seen it in places, that there's campaign civility. Okay. RCV, another RCV impact is that there's better representation for women and people of color. Here's some data that was put together for city council. This is in California, I believe. Before RCV, on the city council, the women representation was 23%. And after RCV, it went up to 49%. And a similar result for people of color in the municipal elections, 41% before RCV and 60% RCV. So this is something else that RCV does, is that since it takes away sort of this primacy effect, this idea that the front runner or the safe bet is someone that you should vote for, it allows basically other folks to get involved rather than the candidates that we've had historically in our elections. So where is RCV used currently in the United States? In Maine, it's used statewide. You may be familiar with that. It was used back a couple of years ago, and it was used again in this last election. And there's 20 cities in New York, some really big cities, including New York City, which is going to be using it in May to vote for mayor and council. So this is not a new fad. This is something that's been in place and is working, and people who have it basically enjoy the benefits of ranked choice voting. It's also used around the world in places like Australia and Ireland. It's been used for over 100 years. And again, these folks would never go back to a single plurality voting system. So basically, again, I'm here representing Voter Choice New Jersey. We formed our organization under the guidance of the folks who organized the Massachusetts effort. Unfortunately, the ballot measure failed in Massachusetts, and there have been some, post-mortem done on that. But the folks built a massive organization. They raised over $10 million. So we're building our organization with coaching from the folks who founded the Voter Choice Massachusetts. And so what can you do to help us as the Movement for a People's Party, or as individuals, is that you could sign up as a Voter Choice New Jersey volunteer or supporter. Of course, you can always like and share things on Facebook, or make calls, to activate our support. It's just a basic general organizing. We're working to organize just like the folks, like we're doing here in the Movement for a People's Party. It's all about grassroots organizing and building a big team of people. And here, of course, we always have to ask for money. That's unfortunate truth today. And so we just have some things here as examples. So I saw some folks asking some questions in the chat. I don't know, Kate and Andrea, did you want to spend some time answering questions, or anyone else have anything?
Absolutely. If anybody has any questions, write stack into the chat and we'll be able to go down the line from there. I know we had some, just talk more of a discussion in the chat, but if anybody has any questions.
I see Joyce mentioning that. Yes. So in Massachusetts, they had what's called initiative and referendum, where citizens can put questions on a statewide ballot. We don't have that in New Jersey. So right now we require legislative action in order to enable ranked choice voting in New Jersey. I see here, Andrew, you talked about RCV can encourage higher turnout. That's true. RCV can also save money in that some jurisdictions currently have runoff elections. I know Perth Amboy just had a runoff election for their mayoral race. And so there's an expense there. And then there was actually lower turnout in the runoff election. So this can all be done in one election. The method of voting is called ranked choice voting. The method of counting the votes is called instant runoff voting. It's because you're essentially doing a runoff election within the context of one election. Okay, let me see. Is there any other questions? Does anyone else have any questions?
We have some people lining up for a stack right now.
Okay.
William Olson, you're first.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Herb. I've been reading about these various voting methods for only about 3 weeks, but it seems to me that the one we have sucks. The 3 alternatives, approval, star, and ranked choice voting, all have different kinds of successes and strengths and weaknesses. There are places that overturn ranked choice voting. I can't remember all the reasons why. I just think that it's certainly an improvement. There may be costs for voting machines and software, and I think it would be reasonable to present it as a better way. Is it the best way for all issues? Probably not, but better than what we have. Its tractability, I mean, in terms of its, knownness in this country is more significant than approval or star.
Go.
Well,
Get out of here.
so anyway, just a brief comment. This stuff gets awfully complicated
You're
for
bad.
different metrics.
Yeah,
Go.
you're right, Bill. The approval voting is something that some jurisdictions, I think North Dakota, I think we have approval voting, and maybe St. Louis. And the Center for Election Science is actually behind approval voting. And what that is for folks is that it's just basically a checkbox. There'll be a bunch of candidates. Instead of ranking them 1, 2, 3, you just check the ones that you approve of. Part of the research behind that says that that's very good in a multi-member districts, whereas in a single member district like we currently have in Jersey, ranked choice voting may be more effective. And you're right about ranked choice voting being more well known. And right now, any change that we can make to our voting system is going to be an improvement, as we've seen with the primaries here in Jersey, with the county line and the spoiler effect in the general election, and the inability for third parties to get any traction, or any other parties. I mean, it's just that, again, another aside, in 1920 was the last time there was a major change to our electoral system, and that's when they made it really hard for third parties to basically get blessed as an official party. And it was also the same year that women were given the right to vote, which I find is very curious, because the same year that women got the right to vote, they made it harder to organize a party. So I'm not sure that there's cause and effect there, but it doesn't look good, if you know what I mean.
Thanks, Herb. Next, we have Donald Leach, a question.
Yeah, if you could explain how ranked choice voting affects gerrymandering. I think that's a really interesting point.
Well, in some ways, the two are not related, except that the idea that if we have ranked choice voting over time, we'll get more democratic representation, and we'll have less of an influence of special interests. So the effect on redistricting will probably be delayed to some effect. We're doing redistricting now. If we could get ranked choice voting installed in a couple of years, then by the time it's time to do the redistricting again, we would hope that the folks who have the power to do the redistricting would be less influenced by special interests, and which is what causes the gerrymandering to a great extent. Does that make sense, Don?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think there's also if the districts get larger, the effect of gerrymandering will be largely diluted by the ranked choice voting.
What do you mean, just with population increases? Or
if districts were merged together to make like a super district, and
with multiple seats, yes.
Yeah, with multiple seats, then
right.
Voting would be much more in line with what the voters actually want.
That's right. And there's a thing called proportional RCV, and in general, on the academic side, they talk about preferential or proportional voting as like a general classes of changes to our voting system. And so, like what you're saying, Don, is right. And a lot of people believe we should go to multi-member districts. So what that would look like would be, instead of having 40 assembly districts, we might have, with 2 people each, we might have 10 districts with like 8 people each in them, which would give more people, more parties the opportunity to potentially get enough support to get a seat in a legislature.
Mm-hmm. Thanks.
Sure.
Our next question is from M.W. Epstein.
You could just read it if they don't want to speak.
Yeah, that's what we were just talking about. With multi-member
Sorry,
districts.
sorry, my mic was muted. I thought I'd unmuted it, but anyway, I had a question about the relationship between ranked choice voting and proportional representation, because I grew up in Europe, and virtually all countries in Western Europe have proportional representation. And to me, it seems, now I've lived here several decades, that the duopoly, as Nader correctly calls it, you sort of have a vicious cycle whereby they already accumulate all the power, and then with gerrymandering and everything else, they make sure to entrench that there aren't any other possibilities. But the ranked choice voting seemed to me, it's directed at the individual candidates, but it doesn't necessarily change the balance of representation and power in terms of parties. And I mean, yes, it does, but I think proportional representation would be more democratic and also representing the parties better without excluding them, on the basis of a duopolistic or winner takes all system.
Yeah, I agree with you. Proportional representation would be a further upgrade to our system. We're looking at ranked choice voting as something that has some traction. It is pretty simple. People know how to make choices. Proportional representation, or which can be done with or without RCV, is definitely more democratic, and it's used more in parliamentary systems, but we could also implement it here. So we agree that our system is flawed, as we all know, and all these innovations, any of them would help us.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, I believe you're next for Stack.
Yeah, so I really had more of a comment than a question. So like with the proportional representation, we have to get in the game before we can change the game. And so, to me, ranked choice voting helps us get in the game, just like, helps a third party, which is why I like ranked choice voting, because, the Greens have had a problem all these years because a lot of people would have voted for them if they weren't voting for the lesser of two evils. And so this way they can still have their first choice be the third party, the Green Party or the new major party, People's Party, be their first choice, and then have that lesser of two evil as their second choice. And, more people would vote, I think would be willing to vote that way, come out and vote who normally don't vote. And I think they would also vote their conscience with ranked choice voting as opposed to the lesser of two evils. And then once we get in there and we change all the attorney generals across the nation, we can fix the gerrymandering, but that's going to take years, because they're not going to let you fix what's broken when it's working for them, So
yeah, that's a good point also, Kate. And one of the things I like about ranked choice voting is that I think of it as a better thermometer to take the temperature of the electorate, because you have a lot of people out there who would support Green Party or other parties who don't feel comfortable expressing that in the voting booth. So we're not really getting that information out of the electorate. Whereas if people could, even if they put the Green Party as a second choice, we would still have that data that shows that there's a certain number of people who would support the Green Party or just aren't totally, against, particular parties. That's another thing that approval voting helps with as well.
Yeah. I don't like approval voting because everybody gets the same, from what I understood from the presentation I watched a couple weeks ago that MPP was doing, is that it looked like everybody got the same. There wasn't a rank. There was everybody, if you were voting for A, B, and C, they all got A, B, and C got the equal, it wasn't, I wanted B first and then C and then maybe A. It was everybody got everything, and you could vote for everybody. And then, that doesn't work for me. But
Right.
yeah. So,
yeah, and there's also systems where like you get like a certain sort of bulk, you get like 100% of votes, and you can, divvy them up to different places, folks, like give somebody 100 or 80 and 20, but that makes it a little more complicated, obviously.
Yeah.
So RCV is pretty simple.
Yeah. Okay. So Andrea lost the stack. So next is it's MW Epstein again? Do you have another question?
No, I'm sorry. No, I misunderstood the stack procedure,
Okay.
so I hadn't entered stack the first time. But no, I would definitely want other people to. And thanks for your question. I mean, I think that was a very good point. The entry, using RCV as a sort of entry strategy. Thanks.
Okay. So then next would be Brian. Brian Etchen. I'm sorry, I'm from the Midwest. I murder names every day.
It looks like
What I
Brian's
do.
he's trying to talk, but it looks like we can't hear him.
No.
Yeah,
Maybe you also muted
question,
the microphone.
Okay.
I guess this one doesn't work. My question was on the nature of the resistance to RCV. Do you think that there is any sort of substantial portion of the population that actually would prefer our current system, or do you think it more has to do with the fact that special interests are the only ones that inform them on these kinds of issues?
I think it's probably both. Obviously, there's special interests connected to the political parties, especially, that are going to want to maintain the status quo. And some of the things that they bring up, like it's too complicated or it's too expensive, are just basically false. But, you know, as we see, like in Jersey, especially in our primary elections, a lot of people are comfortable with the status quo. They trust the status quo. So there is potentially resistance both from special interests and a certain amount of, I guess it's more like inertia of the voting, you know, electorate. And that's where, you know, our group, basically we're formed mostly as like an education group. We're here to educate folks on ranked choice voting. We're a nonprofit 501c3. You know, we don't engage in any kind of, you know, political activity. So, but, you know, that's our job to actually, that's our job. If anyone who supports RCV, it's your job to talk it up basically and promote it.
Thank you.
That's why we invited Herb here to speak, because this is important. This is definitely something that can benefit, well, the People's Party, but everybody, because, you know, the current system is just so, it's wrong, especially in New Jersey, between the line and don't get me started. So that's the last of what's on stack. Does anybody else have any questions for Herb? Non-voters are critics of the status quo.
Well,
So
well, right, that's what, yes, you know, if we increase voter turnout, people who don't vote now will start voting.
absolutely.
And, you know, that's important, obviously.
Yeah, I think that it would get more people involved for sure.
So, okay, there's no other question. Let's see. Yeah, okay, that leads, we're Voter Choice New Jersey. Our website is voterchoicenj.org. You can go there and sign up as a supporter or volunteer or a donor. We have a monthly strategy meeting, a statewide monthly strategy meeting. We've gotten up to as high as 70 people attending those meetings. Our next meeting is on February 21st, Sunday at 6:30. So everyone's free to come. It's and we have, like I said, we have a team-based approach. And in our statewide strategy meeting, we break out into our teams where folks are doing actual work like social media. We have messaging. We have a great group of folks doing messaging, arts and video. You know, I'm really happy. I mean, we have a great group of people. I couldn't be happier with the folks that we're attracting. To see some of their faces on this call, actually. So all good people. So
I joined their last meeting and Herb tried to put me to work. I was like, well, I don't have no more time. he threw me in a group. I was like, no. But if you have time and want to get involved, well, first they explain more about it. But even if you want to do presentations for them, they have a training for that. And but they really have a nice group of people, and they have 5 or 6 people in each group, and they're doing a great job. Mm-hmm. Let's see, there's a couple more comments.
Yeah, I see one about, yeah, that's a big issue that we're trying to figure out. I've actually gone on Facebook. A question is, do you think most of your supporters are registered Democrats? And the answer right now is yes, and that's not good. I've actually, quote, infiltrated some conservative groups on Facebook to try and promote the meeting, and because we're nonpartisan. And I really started out as an independent. I did run in a Democratic primary for county clerk in Middlesex County, but I do consider myself an independent. And we really need to be nonpartisan, and we need more support. We need a broad spectrum of support. And on the right, of the spectrum, people do look at this as like a progressive issue. So that's something that we need to work on and overcome. And in fact, the reason the postmortem in Massachusetts was that the messaging to the conservatives was not powerful enough, and that's why the ballot issue did not pass in Massachusetts.
Thanks, Herb. I really appreciate all that. That was definitely, a wonderful presentation that you guys have put together. It really breaks it down for everybody to understand exactly what it is, and there are more options out there.